Okay, so what if I told you that a 400-year-old playwright and a 20th century philosopher were basically obsessed with the same thing? Sounds like a stretch, right? Well, let's find out.
So let's start with a little puzzle. On one side, you have the world of William Shakespeare. Iambic pentameter, sword fights, the whole deal. On the other, you have the world of existentialist philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre. Think smoky Parisian cafes and intense debates. These two worlds feel miles apart. But what if they were actually asking the exact same questions?
And the answer, which might actually surprise you, is that they share this deep, profound obsession with the biggest questions of all. What does it mean to be human? What is our purpose? Who are we when all the labels and expectations are stripped away?
I mean, just listen to this. Shakespeare was capturing this kind of inner turmoil centuries ago. You have characters like Richard III literally wrestling with who he is, his identity completely fracturing right before our eyes. This isn't just a bit of drama. It's something much deeper. It's what we would now call an existential crisis.
All right, so let's really dive into this idea, which is pretty provocative, that Shakespeare was, in a way, a proto-existentialist. He was playing with these ideas long before the philosophy even had a formal name.
So, the main argument here, and this is drawn from some amazing work by the scholar Charlotte Keyes, is that Shakespeare was using his characters and his plots to experiment with existential concepts. He wasn't just telling stories, he was putting massive philosophical problems about being human right there on the stage.
But to really see this connection, we need to do a quick crash course on what existentialism actually is. And trust me, it's way more than just brooding in a black turtleneck.
So at the very heart of it is this really radical idea: existence precedes essence. Think about it like this. A paper knife is designed with a purpose, its essence, before it's ever made. But for humans, it's the other way around. We're just thrown into the world first. We exist, and only then, through the choices we make, do we define our own essence.
And that leads to this kind of terrifying concept of radical freedom. As Sartre famously put it, we are condemned to be free. We can't escape it. Every single moment, every action, or even inaction, is a choice that defines who we are. And the weight of that responsibility, it's all on us.
So this crushing freedom basically forces us down one of two paths. The first is authenticity. That's where you embrace your freedom, you own it, and you take full responsibility for the person you are choosing to become. The other path? That's called bad faith. That's when you lie to yourself. You pretend you don't have a choice, you blame your job, your family, society, anything to escape the pure anxiety of being free.
Okay, so keep that framework in your head. Now let's turn back to Shakespeare's stage, because once you know what to look for, you start to see these exact philosophical struggles everywhere.
Just look at Macbeth. At this point, he hasn't done anything yet, but the mere idea of murder, the horrid image of what he could do, is making his heart pound against his ribs. It's physically shaking him. That is existential anguish. It's the dread that comes with staring your own terrible, radical freedom right in the face. And believe me, this is not a one-off thing. Shakespeare's plays are absolutely packed with characters whose sense of self just crumbles under pressure. They feel like they're breaking apart inside, or like their very identity is just dissolving. Think about Antony after he's been defeated. He says, "Here I am, Antony." But then he admits he cannot hold this visible shape. He feels his very self is dissolving, that he can't hold on to who he is now that his public role as a great general is gone. His being has become unglued from his name. And now get this. This is what really seals the deal on this connection. Centuries later, the existentialist Albert Camus used the exact same metaphor, water slipping through your fingers, to describe how elusive the self is. It's incredible. Shakespeare had his characters feel what Camus would later write about as philosophy, that the self isn't some solid thing you can grab, but this fluid, changing, slippery thing.
So you might be wondering, if these connections are so clear and so powerful, why isn't this how we always talk about Shakespeare? Well, it's a great question, and the idea has had a pretty rocky history in academic circles.
This whole idea has gone through this fascinating cycle. Back in the 50s and 60s, some critics tried to connect Shakespeare to absurdism, but their arguments were a little flimsy. Then, the pendulum swung completely the other way, and scholars focused only on history, arguing characters were just products of their time. But now, we're seeing this really smart, nuanced return to these ideas, recognizing just how deeply Shakespeare was wrestling with these timeless problems of the self.
So, why does any of this academic back and forth really matter to us today when we just want to go and enjoy a play?
Because it's not just some academic game. Reading Shakespeare through this lens gets right to the core of why his plays still hit so hard 400 years later. It unlocks this incredible existential energy that's pulsing right underneath all that beautiful poetry.
Suddenly, you see the characters not just as historical figures in funny outfits, but as people who are wrestling with the exact same dilemmas we are. Dilemmas of choice, identity, and the search for meaning. You see the true philosophical weight behind their anguish, their joy, and their decisions.
And that really leaves us with one last big thought. Maybe Shakespeare's true, lasting genius isn't just his incredible language. Maybe it's his ability to put on stage the one single question that defines what it means to be human. The one question we can never, ever escape. In a world where no one gives you a script, how do you choose to live?